fell into this space of I'm just not going to sit here and wait for things to come. If they don't exist, I will make them happen.
Yeah.
So that became the way I approached everything.
Hi everyone, Elle is here today on the Empowered Global Women in Business podcast. And I am with my good friends and one of the just beautiful people, one of the authors of our book, our next book, author number, I think two, a second book, Valentina. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So good to have you. I am excited for this conversation. Before we jump on, though, I want to introduce Valentina. So Valentina is an award-winning executive creative director with an international career spanning 20 plus years. She's a strategic, multi-passionate leader who transforms brands, and I am one of the clients who she did that for me for sure. She empowers people through creativity, empathy, innovation. She's a best-selling author, entrepreneur, speaker, and educator. And her mantra is don't wait for opportunity, create it. Welcome, Valentina. So good to
Thank you.
see
Thank
you.
you.
Your
So good
beautiful
to see you.
face.
And yes, like you mentioned earlier, we've had the pleasure of working together before,
Yeah.
building several brands for you, your personal brand originally, and then Women of the World Network brand. So it's very full circle to still be around and keep talking about, you know, empowerment and entrepreneurship and all these beautiful topics with you. So I'm really happy to still be part of it in any way.
Yes. Yes, me too. Me too. And I know you guys helped actually create the logo for Women of the World Network, which got an award. So thank you for that. And I think your personal journey is so interesting. But before we go there, I want to touch on the book, our
Yes.
next book, because I know you're one of the authors in the our next entrepreneur book. So exploring entrepreneurship is the name of the book, and the name of your chapter is the courage to create my journey in entrepreneurship. And I love your journey in entrepreneurship, but I love the story. I love your tips. You're sharing some amazing actually tips with our readers and your wisdom that you've gained in your journey. But did you want to give our listeners just a high level on this chapter?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to do any spoilers, but I would say since participating in the first book that we did, that was kind of just stories about women of the world and how we got to places. My original chapter was also about courage. And that is a topic that is very much ingrained in my life. And like it's also a way for me to live life, courage first, courage forward. So I wanted to bring that to this chapter too, not only to talk about, courage itself, but really to focus it on how I feel it's an essential part of being an entrepreneur. You need a lot of courage when you
Right.
decide to become an entrepreneur. So the story really has that thread of courage throughout it, but it's not just about that. And I remember when we talked about doing this book, I did take a lot of time thinking, what do I talk about? There's so much to talk about. And I've been an entrepreneur for around 15, 16 years. So I can talk about this till I'm blue in the face. So it's like, what about this would make sense to share in a way that I would think readers find it meaningful and useful? And I also wanted it to be something that we don't really talk about a lot when we talk about entrepreneurship. It's an angle of entrepreneurship that we don't really say out loud very much. We talk about the good things of entrepreneurship a lot and a lot of other topics around it, but I don't think this particular angle is something that's publicly discussed because it also takes a lot of courage to say it out loud. So that's why I wanted that to be the topic of my chapter. And that's why I chose that story to tell because I feel like even though we don't talk about it enough, we need to talk about it more. So I'm kind of like putting it out there to hopefully open the conversation and get more women And really anybody that reads the book, start thinking about that aspect of entrepreneurship too and what that could mean in their lives. And of course, tips and things that are important. And since I just turned 40, I felt like 40 tips would be the perfect number.
I love it. Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy 40th.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, and I love your story. So thank you for sharing that. I know our readers will gain a lot of value and wisdom from your experience in entrepreneurship. And so since we are on this topic, can you share with us what are some of the main lessons like in your years of being an entrepreneur that you learned? And maybe one big one, maybe two big ones that you would want to share.
I would say, I mean, there's so many, but I would say a big one that always came back to me is I always had this thought that entrepreneurship was something I needed to do by myself. Because you either have like a huge team behind you and like investors and all these things, which is, let's say, a different way to approach entrepreneurship, or you're literally starting. We hear all these stories of I started in my room, in my garage. One day I just decided I didn't want to work anymore and I started doing this thing, or I had this as a hobby and then it became a business opportunity. But it's very lonely in so many ways. And I did learn throughout my time that even though it is sometimes, let's say, an endeavor that we embark on by ourselves, it doesn't have to be that way, because I did have so many people that I worked with that maybe weren't on my team. I was a team of one for a very long time, but we're still kind of my peripheral team or my support system as I built these business. So even though it was me, I was never alone. And the more I opened myself and allowed people in, the faster I went and the further I went. Even though it was still my idea, my business, I didn't have to do it all by myself. And I was really
Yeah.
trying hard to do it all by myself in the beginning, and I just wasn't getting the results that I needed. So realizing that it was okay to bring people in, and that didn't necessarily mean that they were in the business, but they were still supporting the business, was a good game changer at some point, and a mindset shift. On the other side of that coin, realizing how lonely entrepreneurship can be in terms of that not everybody's going to understand, not everybody's going to support. And even though sometimes you have a big team, there are aspects of the business that only you know and you understand and you live by yourself. So it's both things. It's a team sport, but also a solo endeavor. And it was interesting to find ways to, even though I felt very lonely in it sometimes, to again go to that support system and that community to get me out of that feeling of loneliness and reach out. And although sometimes that system doesn't fully understand, it was a good compliment to remind me that it might feel lonely, but you're not necessarily alone. So those are
Yeah.
not the same thing. So that was huge for me because it allowed me to make changes in how I did things and how I approached things. And it allowed my business to grow faster and move in different directions that I didn't even think it was possible in the beginning. So that was huge for me to kind of realize. And it was a big, big lesson. And I would always say another big one is the ability to pivot and be flexible was also
Hmm. Hmm.
huge. I started
Yeah.
my business, well, this, I've had multiple business, but this last particular one, I started it in Venezuela before I left the country. And I was able to bring it with me to the States and transform it to be what it needed to be once I moved here. So being able to pivot and be flexible, I mean, we all lived it through COVID. For me, it was different. We were already a remote business, so that part didn't hit me as much. But again, being able to pivot and reinvent and be flexible is also a huge benefit, or I think a skill kind of to develop for the longevity of the business, for to be able to keep the business alive, to be able to work better, to be able to grow. I mean, for so many reasons. So that
Hmm.
was also a big one for me. But I mean, there's millions, and I do share
Yeah. There's so many.
a
Yeah.
couple of them in the book too. But I would say those two are the two big ones that come to mind right now. And I'll let you figure out, I would say, the third one that I would think is huge. But if I tell you, I spoil the chapter. So you'll see it when you read it. You'll figure it out when you read it. You'll see the other one big lesson that I got out of this. You know what I'm
Yes,
talking
yes,
about.
yes, yes. Thank you for sharing those. Yes, there's so many usually, right? And yeah, loneliness, it's definitely one big one. And there are so many skills that we have to learn and adopt and do, right? Like leadership and marketing. We say we're doing sales, we're doing marketing, we're doing everything. And then asking for help too. I think sometimes even recognizing that we need help or asking somebody for advice too in the business of it. There's so many. So thank you for sharing. We are on the Empowered Global Women in Business podcast, of course, and I know you are a woman of the world, multinational woman in business. What does it mean for you to be a woman of the world in business?
I would say having such a diverse background and having such a rich kind of collection of lived experiences from living in different
Yeah,
countries and having such a varied background and such a diverse background, not just in terms of who I am as a person, as a immigrant woman of color, but also as a person that's done a ton of different jobs and has had multiple, like I've lived like a lot of different lives in a way. I think all of those things have given me more equipped toolbox to use when approaching anything in life and or in business. I think
yeah,
a lot of the things I've learned in the different experiences I've had kind of have been adding more things that I have now been able to use every time I have a new project or I wanted to start a new business or I wanted to move to another country or I wanted to start a new hobby or a new relationship or I kind of, you start collecting. Let's say the tools in my box are like a little bit of everything and I couldn't have that if I didn't have the background that I do, if I hadn't had all the experiences that I've had. And it's also where kind of my mantra came from of like, don't wait for opportunity, create it. Because I found myself so many times in a space where I was in a new country or in a new city or in a
mm,
new environment or in a new community. And I had to figure it out. Like, what do I do
yeah,
next? How do I pivot my business? Do I open a new business? Like, what do I do? What's my next step? Being able to answer that question was not always a clear path. There was not always a clear path to answer that. So that's when part of what my parents taught me and how I was brought up. And I just fell into this space of I'm just not going to sit here and wait for things to come. If they don't exist, I will make them happen.
yeah.
So that became the way I approached everything. I think that's very unique, and that is something that I know a lot of people like me that have had this very interesting, very changing lives. And I would say, even if you haven't had that experience, you can still, let's say you've always lived in the same place, done the same thing, or even if your life looks very different than mine, always looking for that next thing to learn, that next thing to be exposed to.
Yeah,
Curiosity is huge here. Like the more tools you can, bring to your toolbox from different places, different people, the better equipped you'll be to make any decision. And that is one of the, let's say, biggest consequences I feel that I've been able to have from being, like you call it, a woman of the world and having all of these different experiences. It's a gift, really, to
yeah.
have so much to work with, and also realizing that if I don't have it, I will find it and I will make it happen. So that's where the don't wait for opportunity, create it came from, and that's how I move through life.
I love that. Yeah, because that enriches you so much. It's that adaptability in the circumstances, in the situation you're in. It builds that character that is courage as well, right? I love that. I can totally relate. Sometimes being bored is also part of it too. Like,
Oh
I feel
yeah.
like, okay, I'm bored doing this. I'm done. I'm kind of done with this part of it.
What's next?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great
what's
question.
next? I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And again, I'm so thankful to your entrepreneurship experience, to your team, your creative eye that you helped us with, me, myself personally, and our brand as well. But I wanted to touch on your interesting angle. So you were working before, and then you moved on to entrepreneurship, becoming an entrepreneur, you built your company, a successful company, you got an award, and then you went back to working, and now you are enjoying this and having success with it. So, in these transitional moments, how do you go from one to another? maybe when do you feel that it's time for you to, right, to transition?
Yeah, the when is always tricky, but I would say, so I started working when I was in college, and I worked throughout my entire college career. In Venezuela, our degrees are 5-year degrees. So
Mm.
I started looking for jobs the first semester. I'm like, okay, so what am I need internship work experience, first job. And my first job was I was strategic marketing assistant for a boy band manager in a record label. So I was like a paid groupie. It was the most fun job ever. And I started learning about marketing when I was 19 and working with brands and planning partnerships and doing all these things. So all my jobs initially during my college years were really like in a marketing team, like in the record label, or I worked at Red Bull for a while in their communications department. So it was always marketing communication roles, trying to build, a resume for when I graduated. That was kind of the goal at the time. By the time I graduated, I started working in advertising agencies, and that's how I ended up finding my way to creative work within advertising, to becoming a creative as a job. And I did that for many, many years, worked in small agencies, worked in big agencies, worked with huge brands. I was creative for Pepsi for a while in the agency that I was in. I worked with like Venezuelan brands, with international brands, got to do some really cool projects. And I got to a point where I knew I wanted to be in business. I always knew I wanted to be in business since I was little. And after I graduated college, I went to do my MBA because I knew I wanted to run my own business. I love education. If I could, going to school could be a job, I would want that job because I knew I'm like, I want to open a business, but I want to know exactly what to do, how to do it. Like, I want to have all the tools to be successful at having a business. So I did an MBA. That was kind of like the next thing to do. So I did my MBA and I knew someday I will start a business. I went back to Venezuela. I did my MBA in Argentina, I went back to work, but always in the back of my mind is I will have my business. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I will own my own business. And time went on. I started opening businesses. One of my first businesses were dance related. I had an apparel line. I worked in some dance studios. I danced professionally for years. So I left advertising, like in that agency space, because I didn't see myself doing that same job for the rest of my life. It's a very male dominated space, and especially in the creative space, all creative directors were men. And all the women that I saw were not like climbing the ladder. So I was like, am I even going to ever be able to do that? I wanted to be an executive creative director. I didn't see the possibility in the market that I was in. I'm like, it's never going to happen. So the only way is to get out and do my own thing. I opened my dance businesses. I decided to take a break from advertising, go into dance full time, make that my life. I couldn't keep doing that after a very bad injury. And then that was my window. Okay, these businesses in dance are great. They can keep going. I can't dance anymore. What do I do with my extra time? I opened another business because I wanted to have all the businesses, hundreds of businesses. I wanted to be a business mogul. And I opened my agency and kept the other businesses for a while. That pivotal moment for me to going from working for somebody else to starting my own business really hit when I didn't see a future for myself in the space that I was in, where I started wanting to change the space that I was in. I'm like, the problem might not be the space. The problem might be that I just don't fit in here anymore. Nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with me. We're not a match
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
align with my values and what I want to do. So I started looking for a way out that aligned with what I wanted to do in the future. And that's when I started doing businesses, first in dance, then in advertising. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of support. I just made sure that I had my basics covered, a roof over my head, and a way to pay for food. I'll figure the rest out. I had a couple of, some money in savings. I'm just going to try it and see what happens. I, of course, made sure that I was not fully broke, but I just gave it a shot and see, I'll figure it out. I had support from my family at the time. If I needed to go back because it didn't work, that was a possibility. And I just went for it and created this. I had a lot of partners in the dance companies, so that also made it easier. It wasn't me by myself. It was a group of people with a common goal. But that aligned with what I wanted to do. That aligned with my values, with how I saw myself in the future, with everything I learned. I wanted to put that to use. It kind of aligned with my dream of having multiple businesses and doing this perfect combination of creativity and art in multiple ways, in advertising and in dance. So it was like a perfect storm for a while, but the pushing moment was to find alignment, match the inside with the outside, match what I was feeling with what was happening. That was not
Yeah.
clicking. So I needed to find the right match.
Mm-hmm.
And once I figured what that was, then I made the move. So that's how I knew it was the right time. I couldn't take it anymore in the space that I was at. I couldn't see a future. I had minimal basic requirements to make the move, and I just went for it. Worst thing that can happen, it
Yeah.
doesn't work, I can always go back. So that was
Yeah.
the jump from being employed by somebody else to becoming an employer for other people. It is about alignment. The same way trying to align myself got me into entrepreneurship, that was the same thing that got me out of entrepreneurship and took me to my next thing. It was really aligning myself with what I was feeling, the signs that I was getting, that having a really honest moment of accepting what was happening and having the courage to do something about it. Because that's another thing. We can be very unhappy, but stay the course for multiple reasons. Because it's hard, because you are not always able to pivot. You're not always able to change. There's so many things that come into play here. There's other people's lives that also were impacted by any decision that I made. There were a lot of reasons for me to stay the course. Being able to connect with myself and be honest with myself, being able to figure out what I needed to do next. And then once I figured it out, actually do something about it was key to be able to make that decision. That also, when you asked like, how do you know, or when do you know when the right time is? If you don't figure it out on your own, the world will tell you, or your body will tell you, or your environment will tell you. I got out of dance because my body told me to, because
Yeah.
I got injured
Yeah.
and I didn't have any other choice. I went into entrepreneurship because my environment told me to. My environment
Yeah.
kept saying, this is not it. Move. The same thing happened when I decided to leave entrepreneurship. The signs were
Mm-hmm.
there. I didn't want to, it was too much to accept until I had no other choice. And then I had to make a decision, and it was being able to have the courage to realign myself is what ended up being, let's say, the trigger that is like, yes, I need to go back into alignment, and this is not it. I need to find what it is. And when I found it, everything clicked, and it was like it was planned, which it wasn't. But it felt planned because everything just fell into place in the most perfect way, because I
I
was
love it.
finally aligned. And I'm sitting here 9 months later after being in this new role that I'm in. And I can't believe it. It took me almost 2 years to finally make the decision and go through with it. I wish I would have done it sooner, but it's a perfect time for everything. I don't know where I would be if I would have taken the decision sooner. How I got here
Yeah.
is the best way, because where I'm at right now is, I think, exactly where I'm supposed to be.
It's just you could, I guess we could just summarize it as just living your truth, right? So if
Oh
it's
yeah.
no longer alliance, I think that's where the key is. And we actually had another podcast earlier today. We talked about how it is important to be truthful to ourselves first, because we can listen to the messages and we can try to follow what we hear from outside, but does it resonate, right? Does it align with what we are doing, what we want to do? And I think that's such a key for everything. So thank you for that reminder, Valentina. And I'm so excited about the book. Again, our listeners, you'll be able to check out our book, Exploring Entrepreneurship, coming out in October. By the time this will be live, the book will be out. you can get your copy and check out Valentina's
Yes,
story as
please.
well and all the tips that she's giving. And we'll post the links on how to connect with Valentina as well. Thank you for sharing that story, that journey. I think sometimes we attach ourselves too much to the situation, right? Like you were talking in business, and then there are people involved, and or whether it's work or business, anything, right? Or maybe a person is not happy at work, and then we attach ourselves and we just drag along for so long, even though we are not happy. I think just recognizing that it's part of life. The only constant thing in life is change, right? And so I think
Yeah.
recognizing that and catching that, and then changing the environment to really help ourselves to recognize that, like you said, recognizing it first and then deciding, okay, what am I going to do about it? And then
I'll,
taking the steps.
exactly. And I'll never forget talking to my therapist during that process.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of going to therapy. I've been going to therapy for 20 years, maybe or more. He kept saying, you're not watching a movie of your life, right? You're living it. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're not an spectator in your life where things just happen to you and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You are the main character. You have the power to change things. You just have to make a different choice. It's not
Yeah.
easy,
It's,
but
yeah.
you have the agency to change your reality immediately. What are
Oh,
you
so
waiting
good.
for? Nobody's coming to do it for you. And that was so big because as I lived by don't wait for opportunity, create it mantra in that moment, I was in such a dark place that I couldn't see it
Yeah.
until he
Yeah.
reminded me, oh, yeah, I put myself here. I can take myself out of it.
Out
And
of it. Yes.
it was just a matter of making a different choice. Um,
Yeah.
however complicated that can be. I'm not saying it's easy, but we always have the power to choose differently. And
Mm-hmm.
we can
Mm-hmm.
do that literally every minute of our lives. We
Yeah.
have all the power. We sometimes just forget about that.
We do. We really do. So powerful. Thank you. I love it. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna move us to
Yes,
the rapid
rapid
fire
fire.
questions now.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Your favorite book name is?
That's a super hard one.
I know there are
Uh,
so many good books, right? So many books we read.
I can't pick just one. Also, yeah, that's tough. I'll pass. I'm gonna say hours. How about that?
Yes, exploring entrepreneurship. Awesome. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Favorite international destination to visit?
It's really impossible to pick one, but I would say the next place that I would love to visit, I would love to be able to go back home. That would be
Mm,
my next dream vacation.
Summer or winter?
Fall.
I get that often. On this one, I get that
Fall
often.
is my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and the final question is things that you have discovered about yourself recently.
I didn't give myself enough credit and that I have
Mm,
everything I need to achieve everything I want.
beautiful. Thank you for playing.
Happy
Thank
to
you for sharing.
anytime.
Yes, and thank you for taking the time for this conversation. I'm so happy for your new, path, for your new journey where you are. Actually, we are on the same coast right now.
Yeah,
I
I
need to
love
come and
it.
visit you in Seattle.
You totally should. And fall is a great time to do it. Summer is beautiful though. I would highly encourage you to come visit me in the summer. But
Awesome.
thank you for inviting me and thank you for inviting me to be part of the book again. And it's always good to chat and to connect. And I'm just so proud to see how the brand has grown, how you have grown as an entrepreneur. I see you doing all these beautiful, I love that you're dancing. Every time I see your videos, it reminds me of
Oh,
time dancing. So I
I
love
didn't
that we
even know you
have
were.
that. Yeah.
I didn't even know until we did this book, right?
Yeah.
I
I
got to
mean,
know that
well,
part, and that's another thing about like the person, and we were together, we saw each other, and we lived in the same area, and all of this. But then, these intricate parts of our lives, sometimes we don't get to even talk about. And
yeah.
then, yeah, it's
But I love
thank you.
seeing you. You look so happy when you dance, and that is such a powerful thing. It brings back so many
Mhm.
memories for me. So it's very exciting to be able to connect again, and I can't wait for people to read everything and hopefully find some value in the stories that we share and in this conversation today. Really, that's my only goal with doing stuff like this, is to be able to share something that somebody might maybe find useful for themselves at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Yeah, there's so many lessons in the book. Thank you for sharing your journey, Valentina, for bringing your presence, for being completely vulnerable and transparent, and for sharing your courage with the world. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.